Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 24. And the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I've taken vengeance on my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. So, as we remember the beginning of 14, Jonathan stepping out in absolute faith, just him and his armor bearer, going into the garrison of the Philistines. Something he has done before, but took more people with him last time. Having this victory, the earth starts to shake. Victory starting to be had. Saul, calling Abijah, tells him, hey, bring the ark of God. Start asking God, inquiring of God through the Urim and the Thummim. He then tells him when he sees that the people are flooding out of the garrison, people are fleeing from the Philistines, that, you know what, put your hand back, stay your hand, don't worry about it. We're joining the battle. So Saul and his people join the battle. But that day, earlier, he had forced his people to take an oath, saying, Cursed is any man who tastes any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies. So they're going out to battle without eating. They're going out to battle under this dumb oath, which, let's be honest, almost every oath is stupid. That's why Jesus says, don't make an oath. Just yes be yes, no be no. Don't make promises, because oftentimes you live to regret them. So now you have an entire army of people doing ridiculous physical activity in the sunlight, in the sunshine of a, veritable desert. It's not really a desert, it's more wilderness area, but mountainous, hot, going forth, doing all this labor, sweating, struggling, fighting, which, if you've ever seen people fight before, ever watch a boxing match, MMA, you'll see that these are highly conditioned people. Highly conditioned people. Incredibly conditioned people. And then they start throwing punches back and forth for about 33 seconds, and they're gasping for air. It's not because they're fat and lazy. They're incredibly conditioned people. It's because when you do a physical activity like that, with all the adrenaline pumping on top of it, you get blown up real quick, meaning your lungs blow out. You cannot suck air anymore. And he's putting them under an oath of not gaining the nourishment back when they have the time. You ask for armed forces people that have served in the military. I am not one of them. But when you ask them, they'll say, any chance you got to eat, you ate. Any chance you got to take a drink, you took a drink. Anytime you had a chance to go to the bathroom, you went to the bathroom. Any chance you had to nap, you napped. Because you didn't know when the next time you were going to have a realistic chance was. So you took it when you had that chance, in that moment. Now you have an army, a medieval army, fighting with not even proper weapons, going into battle without the nourishment they need, the nourishment for their body. And it's an insane thought to even think that he would hamper his people in such a way. But such is the almost arrogance and pridefulness of Saul. We see this very much, this same kind of statement from Samson when he goes to collapse the temple of Dagon. Lord, give me the strength back so I can take vengeance for my eyes. Not take vengeance for you. Not take vengeance for what they did to your ark, for how they've mistreated our people, your people. No, take vengeance for my eyes. Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, an anathema against him. Let him be an abomination before his people if he eats any food, because I want to have my vengeance on my enemies. Not until we win, not for the glory of God, but so I can have taken vengeance. It's almost like he's once again trying to take glory out of the hands of his own son and Jonathan. We saw him do that with the first attack on the garrison, which brought forth the Philistine army to begin with. That it was Jonathan's army that attacked and had victory and made the Israelites an abomination once again before the Philistines and brought the Philistines back to attack. And when the trumpets went out and the word went out, all the Israelites, it went out that Saul had a great victory. And once again, it's my vengeance, even though he was the one that was sitting under a pomegranate tree, sitting trying to be calm against this flood of Philistines who at any moment could break down and come after them. It was his son who stood out on faith, and him who at every opportunity has taken the path of taking on more responsibility than he should, more authority than he should, and each moment where he has the ability to fully and honestly seek out the advice and the will of the Lord for him and for his army, he tells people to stay their hand. I'm going to sacrifice because I can't wait for Samuel. Okay, priest Abijah, withdraw your hand from the Urim and Thummim. You don't have to continue asking God. We're joining the battle because it looks like it's turned in our favor. And it had. But that's not following God. That's following the horizontal and not the vertical. Now all the people of the land came to a forest, and there was honey on the ground. And when people had come into the woods, there was the honey dripping. But no one put a hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. So they come into the forest, they come into the woods, and it's almost as God put this out to torture them, to prove a point. Because we'll see this all bear out. Almost like the Lord put this out in front of them on purpose. Put all this honey out there. I mean, since when is honey this easy to find? That it's just dripping out. And now I think honey's nasty. But apparently it is a very refreshing thing to have. It's got the sugar. It's got the nutrients you would need after fighting and struggling. And they're in the midst of the battle. They're still hunting the Philistines. And everybody's terrified to indulge in this honey that they could easily touch. Because they know this oath didn't just come from Saul. They're afraid of Saul. They're afraid of his curse. But they're afraid of the oath that's made because they're afraid to break an oath of God. Because they're always told, you never break an oath of God. Because God expects his oaths to be kept even if they're made in incredibly stupid fashion. So you have these people going through this forest, not able to nourish themselves after all that they've been through. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. Because remember, he was out attacking the garrison. So he hadn't heard the stupid oath. Now that everybody's kind of formed back together, because the battle has shifted to Beth Aven, and now they're going through this forest, Jonathan has no idea about this oath. Therefore, he stretched out the end of the rod that was in his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his countenance brightened. So he sticks out his rod, gets honey from the honeycomb, probably because of the bees, takes the honey off of his hand, and immediately his countenance brightened. His face brightens up. His eyes are brighter. He's now refreshed, having eaten something, even though it was just a little bit of honey. Just that caloric intake and that rush of sugar, that much needed nutrient, would brighten you up, would strengthen you up. I would argue how long a sugar rush would really last. But once again, not a honey person. But this was a treat. this is literally a sweet, tasty treat hanging off a tree, dripping out. This is an amazing blessing put before the people by God that ends up being a curse upon them because of the leading by the earthly king they wanted over the heavenly king they had. They wanted the earthly king to provide them victory. And this is a provision and a blessing by the heavenly king that reigns supreme. And now they can't take of it because the blessing of the Lord has become a curse of the people. And how often do we see that in our Christian walk in a country like this in the Western world that has turned their backs on the truths and sovereignty of God and now walk in a debauched, humanistic, materialistic way? And so many of the blessings of the Lord have become the cursings of the people. Families, spouses, children, grandchildren. People today view them as curses because of the way that they were raised, because of the way they were led, because of the way that they were educated, and by the way that the economy through the horizontal, by the provisions of man, have fallen so flat. Don't ever not have a child because you're afraid of being able to afford a child. The Lord will provide. Doesn't mean all of a sudden you have a kid and you're moving from your one-bedroom apartment into a mansion. But it does mean that when you trust in the Lord for His sovereign protection for you and your family, He gives you what you need. And people will point to families out there with nothing. But there's so many blessings in simply having a family. Blessings that you would never have otherwise. Having children is not easy. It's not always fun. It's not always the greatest thing in the world when you look at the horizontal. Having to punish your kids. Having your kids rebel against you. Looking at the cost of raising a child. Looking at the heartache and the heartbreak of seeing them hurt, seeing them sick, seeing other people break their heart. Those things are never easy. But the benefits, the glorious benefits far outweigh anything that could possibly be down. People only say that it's too hard to raise a child in this economy because they look at the supposed cost it will take you to raise a child from birth to being 18 years old. First off, you're going to be raising your kid for a lot longer than 18 years. I don't know who you think. I mean, you have grown adults borrowing money off their parents because sometimes you need a helping hand. And guess what? That's the blessing of the Lord, that your parents are still there to give you that and help raise their grandkids. There's nothing greater in this world than doing what the Lord said and what the Lord had commanded, going forth and multiplying, having children, having grandkids, having the family He blessed humanity with in the way He wished them to be blessed. Don't let the world we're in and the ones above us, our King Sauls, turn what is a blessing and abundance of the Lord into a curse of man. These people have this abundant blessing before them, this honey dripping from the trees, seemingly enough for everyone to have had their countenance brightened. But a curse because now they have to look at it and long for it and fight the urge and the temptation to eat of it. Because the man king they wanted told them to forego the blessing that their God king had put forth before them. Then one of the people said, "Your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, 'Cursed is the man who eats food this day.' And the people were faint. They were faint, tired, exhausted, starving. And the people tell Jonathan, 'No, you shouldn't have done that. Your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, 'Cursed is the man who eats this,' or eats anything." But Jonathan said, "My father has troubled the land. Look now how my countenance is brightened because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found. For now would there not have been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines?'" He's done a disservice to the country. You've been killing people. You've been winning. You've been destroying their encampments. When we overran the garrison, there's food in there. There are rations. How much more of a slaughter? How much greater could people have fought if they could have eaten when they found the opportunity? If they had picked up some food and as we're marching, gobbled something down and had something in their belly, something to raise their countenance. How stupid of a plan to limit the potential of your own army with a rash oath that didn't need to be made. When you follow the leading of man, you're following at your own caution, because they don't always lead in the way that they should be leading, in the direction that is best. I have a plan for you, for your hope and your future. That hope and future doesn't always mean without turmoil. Because after all, that's being said by Jeremiah to the people being sent out in exile. They were going to face turmoil. That is part of a prayer being told, a prophecy being told onto the people as he's basically lambasting them and bashing them, which is why some supposed learned Christians say, "Oh, I don't like that verse. People take it out of context." It's like, I don't think you put it in enough context. Because that is such a beautiful verse. Because it's God chastising his children and telling them, this is happening because I love you. I chasten you because I love you. So when you have it in its context, it's actually more beautiful than initially thought. And that's the beauty of having the Lord as a provider and following his path and his plan. Because we know it's for our betterment, because he is perfection. And he's going to lead us perfectly. Men, on the other hand, they lead in a way that betters them, sometimes at the expense of those they're leading. And Saul is chasing glory. No one need to eat until the day is over, until I have my vengeance. Placing his glory above the required needs of his people and those working as tools to bring about his glory. It's not what God does. God provides and blesses as we glorify his name. The man king, Saul, starves and curses as his people work for his own supposed glory. And Jonathan is right. His father troubled that land. Troubled that land because instead of a greater slaughter of their generational enemies. Now their people are faint and sluggish and slow, not fighting as they should, not fighting as they could, because of a rash, stupid oath of their leader, turning a blessing into a curse. Now they had driven back the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ajalon, so the people were very faint, and the people rushed on the spoil, and took sheep, ox, and calves, and slaughtered them on the ground, and the people ate them with the blood. Now this doesn't mean that they ate them raw, although I'm not putting that past these people, as famished as they were. But because they were so faint, because they were so broken, they rushed on the spoil. If they had been eating the whole time, if they had been nourished, they would have taken their time. They would have done what they have to do, hang up the smaller animals and bleed them onto the ground. They would have bled them out first and then cooked them. The idea is that they cook the meat with the blood in it without bleeding them first. To us, it doesn't make much sense because, we basically eat our meat like medium raw anyway. So we kind of eat bloodied meat half the time when it's beef and calf and stuff like that. Chicken, of course, you're going to get salmonella. You do that, so please don't do that. But other things, we basically eat it medium raw anyway. So these people weren't supposed to do that. You were not supposed to eat the blood because it's bloodborne pathogens. And we know that now. We're idiots. We're American. We'll do whatever we want. We eat processed food and McDonald's. Nothing will kill us. So, in their rushing, in their faintness, in their starved condition, they're not doing as they should. And now they're not bleeding out the animals because they're in such a rush to eat because of the short-sighted oath of Saul. Then they told Saul, saying, "Look, people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood." Well, of course they are. You're telling the same man who forced them into this stupid position. Now, they still had this decision to make, but desperate people do desperate things. And at this point, if you've ever played sports and you felt yourself being dehydrated by the time you're done, you understand how your body feels and how you will do anything to get food and water into it because you feel like you're going to die. That's what these people are feeling. So although they are making the decision to sin against the Lord by eating with the blood, it's Saul who brought on this desperation of their spirit to begin with. So he said, "You have dealt treacherously. Roll a large stone to me this day." Then Saul said, "Disperse yourselves among the people, and say to them, bring me here every man's ox and every man's sheep, slaughter them here and eat. And do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood." So he's saying, you've dealt treacherously. Roll this, even though they're literally just telling him what happened. But they now have to roll a large stone, and then he's going to slaughter the animals and bleed them as they're supposed to do. But once again, it was you who did it. And he can't see that because he can't see his own sin. Only everyone else's. So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night and slaughtered it there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. This was the first altar that he built to the Lord. Now, I've seen people talk about how this is incorrect to do because he shouldn't be building an altar. That's a Levitical thing and they should have been doing that. But we do see other people building altars after the Levitical priests are put in, like Joshua building an altar to the Lord. And so I don't know if this was an altar for sacrifice or if this was an altar of memorial. If it's an altar to memorial, it wouldn't be a bad thing. If it's an altar of sacrifice, and this is as the first one, then we can start to see how he's really going astray. Now Saul said, "Let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until morning light. Let us not leave a man of them." So he's saying, let's go down and attack at night. and destroy them. Utterly destroy them. Plunder them and destroy them. Let's not wait till daybreak. Let's not wait for them to run again. Let's just destroy them here and there. And they said, do whatever seems good to you. Then the priest said, let us draw near to God here. So Saul asked counsel of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. So Saul said, let's actually seek counsel of God. So he finally goes to seek the counsel of God at the behest of the priest, saying, let us draw near to God here. Let's seek the counsel of the Lord. Let's draw into his presence. So Saul's asking by the Urim and the Thummim, and he's not getting an answer. Nothing's coming to the priest. He did not answer him. And Saul said, come over here, all you chiefs of the people, and know and see what this sin was today. For as the Lord lives, who saves Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he surely die. But not a man among the people answered him. So he's saying, what sin is it today that's causing the Lord not to commune with us? Because if it is even my son Jonathan who died, or who sinned, surely he'll die. Once again, poor leadership leads to poor promises and misplaced oaths. Throwing his own son out there, who ironically is the one. But not a man among all the people answered him, because a lot of them are loyal to Jonathan. Either they didn't know Jonathan ate, or they weren't giving him up. Which shows already, after only 2 years or so, that they're already saying, we wanted this king, but maybe what Samuel said was right. Maybe he is going too far, as we were promised he would. Then he said to all Israel, you be on one side, and my son Jonathan and I on the other side. And the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. I mean, what else are they going to say? He's the king. Therefore Saul said to the Lord God of Israel, give a perfect lot. That lot is referring to the Thummim. So it's based by the Urim and Thummim that they'll ask through the priest, and he'll give a perfect lot, a perfect decision, will not lead them astray, which they should already know. I forgot to move this up. But that they should already know that the Lord God is going to do all of these things. I put this on the screen and forget to move it. It is what it is. Sorry about that. And so Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. So cast a perfect lot. It comes down to Saul and Jonathan. The people escaped, as in they're not the ones who sinned. So eating of the blood was not what did it. And Saul said, cast lots between my son Jonathan and me. So Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. So he's starting to say, hey, it's not what I thought. See, I thought it was going to just be some of them people who had done this bad thing when I screamed out that Jonathan must die. And Jonathan told him and said, I only tasted a little honey with the end of my rod that was in my hand. So now I must die. Now the exclamation point here makes it seem like he's demanding, well, now I must die because I did do the sin. Or in a lot of manuscripts, it seems like maybe he is now, like, must I now die because of that? Because I tasted a little honey at the end of the rod of an oath I never heard you make? So what is this? He's not denying what he did, and he's stepping up. Or maybe he's just saying, look, you said it, so you know what? Now I'm going to die. Saul answered, God do so and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. Because Saul is so caught up in his own loyalty and his own thought processes that he is the one that must be obeyed at all times. He has elevated himself so high in his own mind that he is full well willing to kill his own son. That is how far he is already slipped in a very short period of time from being a man who's going to hide among the equipment instead of being shown before the people to demanding the death of his own son because the people didn't listen to every word out of his mouth. Who thinks that his son is the reason he's being cut off from God, when it's his own arrogance that has cut him off. But the people said to Saul, "Shall Jonathan die who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? Certainly not. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground. For he has worked this with God this day." So the people rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. Then Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. So they're already rebelling against the word of the king that they wish to have. He pronounces that Jonathan needs to die, and they're saying, no, why is Jonathan going to die? He's the one accomplished this great deliverance in Israel. Not you, him. The first time Jonathan attacked the garrison and had victory, Saul took credit. It seems as though this is God's way of showing the people what he had promised about their earthly kings. That he said that because of your disobedience, I'm going to remove the throne from your family line. And he's starting to open up the eyes of the people of Israel to who Saul has become, this arrogant, proud ruler who has elevated himself above all else, which is what God promised any king would do. And they're saying, no, you're not going to let Jonathan die. He's the one that brought forth this deliverance. He's the one who went in boldness of God to that garrison and had victory, not you. He's the one that did this. If it's not for him, we'd still be sitting there with that army over us. Still be cowering in fear in our holes. It was him who did it. So as the Lord lives, they're making their own oath against Saul's oath now. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground. And then you see this. Then Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines. Remember, this whole thing was he's asking through the priest, inquiring of God, whether he should go down in the middle of the night and finish these Philistines off. And because the people rebelled, he turned tail and returned from pursuing them, and the Philistines returned to their own place. Now, the Philistines would be back constantly. Throughout all of Saul's life, they would be there. Because it would be under David that they would be beaten back. But Saul, seeing the way that his people are now pushing against him, he turns away. His arrogance has been repelled by the people's godliness. But he's not being repelled and turning back into a repented state and a confessional state. He's being pushed back because his ego isn't strong enough. He doesn't like the idea that Jonathan could supplant him, even though Jonathan is next in line for the throne. And we'll see that all throughout his relationship with David. His ego, his fragile ego, being bruised by David and the people's love for him. Time and time again, that is seen because of the strength and will of the people for David. And David's desire to follow the Lord with all his heart. So Saul established his sovereignty over Israel, and fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, against the people of Ammon, against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he harassed them. And he gathered an army and attacked the Amalekites and delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered them. This is going to set up what comes next in the following chapter. This is now an overview at the end of this chapter to fill out the reign of Saul. All these things, because in the next chapter we will see him gathering an army and attacking the Amalekites. But this is now the overview. The sons of Saul were Jonathan, Jishwi, and Malchishua. Now, Jishwi, people will see, he also had another son, Abinadab, but Jishwi is another name for Abinadab. So he might have more sons from other people, but Jishwi and Abinadab are actually the same person. And the names of his 2 daughters were these: the name of the firstborn, Merab, and the name of the younger, Michal. The name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam. I can't remember how to pronounce that. The daughter of Ahimaaz. The name of the commander of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. Now there was fierce war with the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong men or any valiant men, he took them for himself. As Samuel tried to warn them, what your king will not be the type of people that the judges were trying to be, who were trying to repel the kingship from themselves. The king you set over you will take. He will take what he wants. He will take your sons, your daughters, your produce, your livestock, your money, and as we saw him trying to do to Jonathan, any glory that was to come to you. Any great deed that you did will now be his. Any great victory you have will now be his. He will take anything and everything he wishes. He will elevate himself above you, and he will, in his pride, see you as a detriment for his own glorification, as a stumbling block of the people to hold him above all else. They wanted a king like everyone else, and they're going to get it. And they're going to hate it, as you can already see them doing. They had a man of God. They had Samuel. They didn't want to trust the next in line. The next in line, ironically, seems to be Saul's son Jonathan, the one that the Lord is truly using for great things. But there's a next on the horizon. There's a David. And after a David, there's a Solomon. And again, in and out of the royal family, people being raised up to do mighty great things for the glory of the Lord until his Messiah came. John the Baptist being raised up to lead people to Christ, to lead people to the Messiah. The days of Saul were fierce, battle-hardened, bloody, and brutal. There was not a peace in his time. There was never a peace in his heart. There was only what always seems to come when people are raised up. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it corrupted Saul, and it will corrupt many others along the line of the history of Israel. Their power will corrupt them, and the Lord will become second. Because like Pharaoh thought that he was a god, and Nebuchadnezzar wanted to think he was a god, and all these people placed themselves above the Lord, because in their success they pull pride. Don't fall victim to pride. Success is not a precursor to your pride. It doesn't have to be that way. Humble yourself before God and let any success you have glorify His name. Because when you're falling into a pride in your success, you're glorifying the name of the adversary, the one whose original sin came from falling because he wished pride among himself, because he wanted to be worshipped. His pride caused him to fall. And one day his haughty look, as he tries to pull people from God again one last time, will lead to his destruction. Don't let it lead to yours. When you have a chance to be a Saul, be a Jonathan. Walk in the Lord and let your glory be His, because ultimately it's His glory that matters. It is contradictory to the world around us, who wishes for our own glory, our own materialistic gain, and everything needs to be you, and it's only brainwashed religious psychos who think that you should never glory in your own success. But it's because they only focus on the here and now. And in their pride, they blind themselves to the eternal that is to come. That is the only thing that matters. Don't make their mistake. Be better. Submit. Glorify the Lord in all that you do. Don't let pride become a stumbling block, and don't let success in this life lead to a pride that blinds you to the eternal glory that is yet to come. Because it does to so many people, as it did to Saul here. Started humble, ends up prideful and taking whatever he wishes because he has success and power. And it has corrupted him horribly. But that's where we shall end it for this morning. I hope this was fruitful for you. I hope to see you back again next time. But until then, be blessed.